There are moments where something starts small. A thought, a reaction, a way you interpret what just happened. It feels like a one-time thing. But then it shows up again and again. At some point, it stops feeling like something you do, and it starts feeling like something that just happens to you. Like it's automatic. Like it's who you are. But it didn't start that way. It became that way through repetition. Not because it was true. Not because it was the only option. But because it was used again and again until it became the easiest path for your brain to follow. Your brain is constantly trying to reduce effort. Every time you respond to a situation, it takes note of what you did, how you interpreted it, and what happened next. If a pattern is repeated, the brain starts storing it as a shortcut. This is part of habit formation. Neural pathways strengthen with use, which means the more something is repeated, the faster and easier it becomes to activate again. Over time, the brain doesn't need to think it through anymore. It recognizes the situation and runs the pattern automatically. Not because it's the best option, but because it's the most familiar and efficient one available. Repetition doesn't just apply to actions. It applies to emotional experiences as well. When a certain interpretation leads to a specific emotional response, that connection gets reinforced. The brain links the situation to the feeling, and the next time something similar happens, it brings both together more quickly. This is reinforcement learning. The more often a feeling is paired with a type of thought, the easier it becomes to access that same emotional state again. Over time, it can feel like the emotion is coming from the situation itself, when in reality it's coming from a pattern that has been practiced. Avoidance plays a major role in strengthening these patterns. When something feels uncomfortable, the natural response is often to move away from it. Avoid the conversation, avoid the situation, avoid the feeling. In the short term, this reduces discomfort, but the brain interprets that relief as a successful strategy. This is how fear-based patterns are reinforced. The avoidance removes the immediate discomfort, which teaches the brain to repeat the same response next time. Instead of resolving the experience, it preserves it. The situation stays charged, and the pattern stays active, ready to be triggered again. Repetition is also shaped by social interaction. The way you respond to situations often gets reflected back to you by others. If you consistently react in a certain way, people start to expect it. They respond to that version of you, which reinforces the pattern even more. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. Your behavior influences how others respond, and their response confirms your behavior. This is how patterns become stable in relationships and environments. Not because they are fixed, but because they are consistently reinforced through interaction. What you pay attention to plays a direct role in what gets repeated. The brain prioritizes information that is consistently noticed. This is part of attentional learning. When certain details, interpretations, or outcomes are repeatedly focused on, they become more accessible. The brain starts scanning for them automatically. This increases the likelihood of noticing the same thing again, which reinforces the same interpretation, which triggers the same response. Attention doesn't just observe patterns. It stabilizes them. What is repeatedly noticed becomes easier to activate, even in slightly different situations. When something feels automatic, it's easy to assume it's permanent. But what feels automatic is usually something that has been practiced. The brain doesn't distinguish between patterns that are helpful and patterns that are not. It strengthens whatever is repeated. That means what feels like a fixed way of responding is often just a well-rehearsed one. The clarity shift is understanding that repetition created it, which also means different repetition can change it. Not instantly, and not by force, but by gradually introducing a different way of responding and allowing that to be practiced instead. Before changing anything, it helps to notice the beginning of the pattern. The first thought, the first interpretation, the first shift in attention. That moment often happens quickly, but it's where the pattern starts to build. By noticing that point, even briefly, you create a small space between the situation and the response. That space doesn't force change, but it interrupts automatic repetition. It allows the brain to register something different, even if the rest of the pattern still unfolds. Over time, that small interruption becomes the place where new responses can begin to form. What shows up repeatedly in your experience is often a reflection of what has been practiced, reinforced, and paid attention to over time. Not as a conscious decision, but as a result of how the brain learns through repetition. This is not about blame or control. It's about understanding the mechanism. The patterns that feel automatic today were built through repetition. And anything built through repetition can, over time, be influenced by new repetition. Not by forcing a different outcome, but by gradually shifting what gets noticed, what gets repeated, and what the brain learns to use as its default response.